We have another interview opportunity on the Informer, again doing it via Zoom. Not one subject this time, but two. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Joining us is the Associate Professor, Dr. Tony Peloso, who's a corporate educator from QUT, which of course is the Queensland University of Technology, and you can see the branding in the background there. So very shrewd of you, Tony, to play that card. And I'm very, very keen to introduce our other subject for this discussion, and it's Brook Dixon, of course, the father for a fourth time. Brand new son has just arrived in the family, young Abe. So Brook Dixon should be smiling from ear to ear. He's the MD at Delos Delta, which is the company that drives smart city and digital transformation for a bunch of clients right around the world. Gentlemen, I want to talk about a subject that has been part of a paper, and the title was The Smart City as a Service. Who's going to start this conversation? Because I think that's a fantastic idea. Conceptually, seeing the city now as a service, we understand that living in a city is terrific. It's a unique lifestyle, but you guys are taking it a little bit further. Can you help explain me through this process and what it means for you, Anthony, first, and then what it means for Brook?
Great. Okay, wonderful. And thank you both. Well, you know, I met Brook, and not only through his impressive bio, but just these incredible global ideas that he has about the way that people in the 21st century ought to live, and what their cities ought to be doing for them, and what citizens ought to be doing for their cities. So that was our initial introduction. And I have a marketing background, both in an applied sense and also as an academic. Mm. And I'm very interested in customer journeys, in customer centricity. In one of my real strengths is around empathy mapping. So rather than just a persona, but who are the human beings? What are they thinking and feeling, and how do they want to live, and what are their pains and gains? So Brook and I had an initial conversation from our relative, our respective perspectives, and realized that, wow, there's a wonderful nexus here. There's a meeting point that brings two disciplines together in a very clever way. So that's my initial thoughts, and thanks for the question. Love it. Thank you.
Can I just, before we go to Brook, I just want to know, because I have a little bit inside knowledge, are you a Jetsons fan, Tony?
I can't believe this. You know, when I was a kid, the Biggles and the Jetsons were just my go-to, and I used to dream about. And you know, in some ways, it's always come true.
Well, so, the reason I ask that is because I know that Brook Dixon is a huge Jetsons man. And can I just tell you, while both of you watch the Jetsons on reruns, I am actually old enough to remember when they were launched the first time on Australian television. And they did make a huge difference. Can I just say that the world we're living in today is a very different world to the one that many of us were born into, right? And from our Jetsons, collective Jetsons experience, I know there is some journey that we're going to have to follow. Brook, take me on that journey, because I know that you imagine a day when we'll have helipads on every corner. We'll have drones delivering, to special clientele on the 66th level and also on the ground floor. But has COVID added another complexity to this, dream of you guys to change the way we look at our cities and also how we behave in them?
Yeah, look, certainly it has, George. Thank you. COVID has absolutely been a catalyst and a driver for the digitisation and modernisation of cities. Although, of course, there are pockets of the world where we're seeing a bit of risk aversion and movement back to business as usual, the way we do things. But overall, it's been a very positive force for change. In terms of the smart city as a service, what we're talking about is turning old services that made the cities congested, hard to navigate, and sometimes frustrating, and making them easier and more convenient. I'll give you a really good example. Parking Parking in the city or the suburbs has always been a point of contention and a point of controversy. Smart technology is allowing us to make that often very frustrating and annoying city service, which we all so much rely on and is part of our day-to-day lives, much easier through real-time information about where to park, through apps which allow us, to pay on our mobile phones and give us warnings when our time is about to run out. This makes that basic service much easier. So that's what we're talking about when we say smart city as a service. The other one too, George, is Uber and other ride-sharing services. I mean, it wasn't 5 years ago that Uber and such ride-sharing services were disallowed right across Australia because our regulations, which were based on 50, 60, 70 years of history, didn't ever anticipate that we'd be using our mobile phones to order transport. People want that sort of service, and we need to allow regulation to modernise, and we need to imagine a world where technology is allowing these sort of personalised services for people.
Good point. I've had a delivery the other day from Woolworths, and guess what? It didn't come in a truck, it came in an Uber. So because our order was sufficiently small enough, it gave them the flexibility. They obviously have an Uber option available for those smaller service deliveries, and it was made with a minimum of fuss, and the guys rolled up and they did the social distancing thing, the glove to the nth degree, and delivered the package. So again, taking your idea and showing you how some of the oldest companies are thinking ahead. Tony, you'd have examples of that too, where you see some of the arcane old practices challenge us. We're still going to have a problem with public transport, aren't we? We have to be smarter there.
Well, that's a fascinating point. In Australia, we really are quite a way ahead in some ways of the autonomous or semi-autonomous point-to-point public transport. And we did an exercise not so long ago with bus drivers using an empathy mapping technique to deeply understand what bus drivers, what these men and women who drive public transport, what they actually do. And it really gave us some incredible insights about the richness of these jobs. So on the one hand, it is coming and it will happen. On the other hand, we also need to remember that if we're taking away humans and putting in technology, we need to be able to replicate what it is that the humans were actually doing. Bus drivers have an incredible presence on buses. They create camaraderie, they create literally citizenship. How are we going to learn to actually recreate that from a technological point of view? And just let me make one more point around this as well. One of the reasons I'm really excited about this project and working with Brook is that, so often and public thinkers and public policy makers try to, design the way that we're going to live. And I think with Brook's thinking, it really is going to be citizens who are actually going to co-create the kinds of services and the kind of lives that we want to live. And because of the way technology works, literally, I think it's going to be possible. And finally, I do agree with you. I remember I live in New Farm in Brisbane, and Australia Post was testing the little robots. And so we would be standing outside waiting for the little robot parcel delivery as part of its trial. It was just so delightful. People were out as if they were walking a pet, essentially. So bit of cuteness to it, but something really powerful.
Anthony, you touched on something that's quite meaningful, and I want Brook to contribute to this. You talk about we're going to be bringing technology in, which replaces people. What are we going to do for the people? What can we do? And I love the idea too that you're saying to me the citizens are going to tell us what they want in their cities and they're going to help to shape it. That's important. That's called demand. But what we're doing here today is giving them an option to dream. And when you start to dream, then suddenly you see things in a very different light. You don't see what can I do? You ask the question, what is possible? And that's a very different thing. Brook, your thoughts? How do we give the driver another thing to do and not just put him on the sidelines?
Yeah, good question, George. And look, there's a lot of doomsayers out there who imagine a world where technology takes over the city and there's nothing for citizens to do and a lot of people lose their jobs. Now, I don't think that's a reality that we're heading towards. And why I'm so positive about it is because the power is in our hands. It's as Tony said, we need to imagine and create in an active sense what our future cities look like and what our future jobs look like. We can't just passively sit back and let big tech companies and billionaires who will very happily create companies and financial mechanisms and company mechanisms that do allow them to keep maximizing profits for themselves. It's about leadership of the citizens. It's about creating democratic process and institutions where cities can magnify the voices of their citizens, but it's also about the policy leadership from local government, state government, and federal government to say, hey, we're going to use technology to make the pie bigger, but also to ensure that the pie is shared around fairly, that we all have jobs, and that technology is not being used in a negative way. So, George, I'm really positive about it, and I want to see people's voices amplified to allow them to create that future that they desire for themselves, and not have some dystopian future where we don't have jobs and technology is telling us what to do, which is simply not on as far as I'm concerned.
Whenever you mention the word dystopian, I keep thinking Mad Max 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and there is a new Mad Max movie coming, and so I don't want to throw you off the scent completely. But I am reminded that Delos Delta is already involved with a bunch of cities, smart city initiatives, and I think is it Werribee? It's Wanneroo. There's a cluster of businessmen and women who are part of those city initiatives, and they think like you. They're saying, why can't we do this, and how far can we take it? Are you seeing that also, Anthony?
I'm so sorry. I thought you were asking Brook that. Well, yes, I am. I want to have a tiny history lesson first, back to Brook's point. I'm fascinated by Elizabeth I. I think that time in history changed the world, and there was enormous disruption.
Oh yeah.
And suddenly there were millions of Brits. My honours thesis was going to be vagrancy in medieval England. My parents didn't fly with them, so it never came to fruition. But the whole point is that there was an incredible disruption in society, and some of it was incredibly painful. But it released people from digging potatoes and chasing sheep to be free to do other things. And after some disruption, society changed and people took more ownership of their lives. And that's exactly what I think Brook is talking about here, is that on the one hand, we're better educated, we're healthier, we live longer, and we have far more opportunities to do things. So our lives are actually more open than closed. And I'm in the world of possibilities. And I think that well-educated people can invent possibilities that, like when I was at university, the concept of being a blogger, no one would have even known that's actually a profession.
Young Abraham, who's just been born, I'm sure is going to have a job that hasn't been invented yet.
Yes.
I'm sure
George.
of that. Absolutely sure of that.
That's right. Absolutely. George, and as an economist, I mean, in terms of jobs, one of my concerns with the people who are modelling, the destruction of our economy and the destruction of jobs is simply that they extrapolate, current trajectories of jobs and really take no account, or indeed they cannot take account of the jobs of the future. And so as I said, I'm very optimistic for a bunch of reasons, both of a historical perspective, which I think Tony has highlighted, but also from a proactive agency perspective. If people in the cities and their local government representatives can give them the digital tools to allow their voices to be heard, to allow them to co-create their cities, to allow them to personalise their cities, to make them more positive, constructive, livable cities, then we are going to create a better future with this technology. And I'm very excited by it, just as Tony is. And I know, George, that you're interested in it too.
I'm very much interested because I see, and I keep hearing from people we know and care for very much, that they are already way in advance of so many other people with their ideas. And we're seeing countries around the world that are now actually building roads that have electrodes or sensors built into them, so that the car or the truck or whatever rolls across it, it has a pathway, an intelligent pathway to follow. Now, no one was building roads like that 10 years ago, or even contemplating that 5 years ago. And yet here we are We're building roads that are filled with not just asphalt and grit and this and the other, but technology.
That's right. That's right, George. So, I mean, recently I was just skimming through a bunch of, tenders around the world, and through that list of tenders, you would be absolutely amazed at the amount of smart technology that is going into new bridges, dams, roads, hospitals, schools, you name it. That technology is there to make those infrastructure and those services more efficient, more sustainable, safer, et cetera, et cetera. So it really is, opening up a whole world of possibility in ways that we just wouldn't imagine. And of course, we need to take care of security and privacy and all those important factors. But the possibility is there. We just need to, quiz ourselves. What is the digital dimension? How are we going to make the most of it? And what is it? What's in it for the people? What do they get out of it? And how do we go down that pathway?
Yeah, terrific stuff.
George, can I jump in here? Yeah. Is this okay? Sure. So, and you bring up an example of tangible infrastructure, and I think that's incredibly powerful. And the other part, of course, of this is the intangible infrastructure. So we know very well that a child in Afghanistan increasingly has access to digital communication. And when that happens, it means that that child will grow up with far more access and far more knowledge. And so, and I think we still tend to think a little bit about regions, about a city in terms of Barcelona or Madrid or, San Francisco or whatever. But once we start to have true virtual communities from young people that have actually grown up with that concept, the idea of a smart citizen in my very positive mindset then becomes a smart global citizen. And there's no reason that over time we can't become more and more and more both connected immediately with our nearest and dearest, and also then in a much more global sense. And I do think that is incredibly powerful. And the more that we help and encourage people to be thinking of themselves as smart citizens living in a smart community, then the better that it is. So thanks for giving the moment to share that.
I cannot tell you how excited I am to hear where you guys are taking this. But here's my dream. My dream is that we can do this in the future, in the not too distant future, and we can do it in holograms, so that I actually can reach you and sit in front of you and talk as if we were there, but allow the technology, the computing power that exists just around the corner, and to take us and give us. Can you imagine the communication possibilities that would open? And I'll tell you what, international travel would change, not necessarily in a negative way, but it would change because businesses would see that technology frees us to do this, and we can do something else with that particular pathway. So much more coming around the corner. But again, as Brook and you too, Anthony, alluded to, you started off by getting excited by a television program all those years ago, but it opened your eyes and it opened the possibility, and that's what you guys are working on. Interestingly, all these years later, it's a very big part of your makeup. So long may you continue to think like the Jetsons, ahead of the curve, and we wish you both continued success. Anthony Peloso, thank you very much, and good luck at the University of Technology in Queensland. And Brook Dixon, good luck, new dad, for the 4th time. I hope Abe just doesn't keep you up at nights, all right? Fantastic stuff. Thank you for joining us on The Informer. Brook Dixon and Anthony Peloso joining us for another segment on The Informer.